Picture a boardroom on the 42nd floor of a Bay Street tower, where 25 of the most expensive legal minds in Toronto sat sweating through their tailored wool suits, and not one of them could find the bomb buried in $350 million worth of paperwork. They had been at it since 7 that morning. It was now past 11 at night. The fluorescent lights hummed. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, and at the head of the mahogany table, Henrik Carrick hadn't raised his voice once. Men who owned half the waterfront in this city didn't need to. He simply turned a pen end over end in his fingers. Click, click, click. Darcy Quinn heard that pen from the hallway. She was 28 years old, a temp, hired 3 weeks ago to handle document filing and courier intake for Carrick Capital's due diligence team. She wore a lanyard that read visitor in large block letters because the permanent badge still hadn't been approved, probably never would be, given how these contracts worked. She had come in at midnight to drop off a set of physical title abstracts that had arrived by courier from Ottawa. Because that was the job, and because the $26 an hour was the difference between her mother's prescription co-payments being covered and them not being. The meeting room door was ajar. A man named Thaddeus Emery, senior partner at the firm brought in to vet the deal, was speaking when Darcy stepped inside. Nobody looked up. To them, she was the filing girl. She might as well have been a potted plant. "Mr. Carrick," Emery was saying, loosening his tie for what looked like the 4th time, "we've run the Fairfax Tower development through 3 independent risk assessments. Edmund Fairfax's team has delivered clean environmental clearance, clean zoning, and a clean title chain. If you don't sign before the Friday close, Fairfax walks and sells to the pension fund buyers out of Vancouver. You lose the King Street corridor. Permanently." Henrik set the pen down. He looked at the window, at the black glitter of Lake Ontario far below. His profile was sharp, the kind of face carved by years of making decisions no one else would make. "Edmund Fairfax," he said quietly, "tried to poach my best project manager in 2019, and when that didn't work, filed a nuisance injunction against our distillery district billed to slow us down while he underbid us. Tell me again why he's offering prime King West frontage at below market value." "The numbers support it," said a man named Warren Blaze, Henrik's senior analyst. He was smooth-voiced, polished, the kind of man who always had an answer before the question finished. "The discount reflects carrying costs. Fairfax is over-leveraged on his Montreal portfolio. He needs liquidity. This is a clean exit for him and a generational asset for us." "Find the problem," Henrik said. "You have 1 hour. If there isn't one, you sign your names to a memo confirming the deal is sound, and you live with that for the rest of your careers." The room lurched back into motion. Laptops opened, phones buzzed, lawyers argued about setback variances and density bonuses in tones that climbed higher as the clock moved. Darcy set the Ottawa abstracts on the side table, the place she'd been told to leave couriered documents, and turned to go. She almost made it. The title package for the main parcel, 1040 King Street West, the crown jewel of the Fairfax Tower proposal, had slid out of the folder when she set it down. She bent to pick it up and, because she couldn't help herself, because numbers talked to her the way music talked to other people, she scanned the top page. Her eyes stopped at the property identification number. She knew pins. Her father had been a senior planner at the City of Toronto for 22 years. He used to come home and explain the land registry system the way other fathers talked about hockey scores. Pin formats in Ontario had been reorganized in 2001, when the land registry went fully electronic. Pre-2001 properties carried a legacy format, 5 digits, a hyphen, 4 digits. Post-2001 parcels were issued differently, 6 digits, hyphen, 4 digits, with the leading digit indicating the specific land registry office. The pin on the Fairfax Tower title read 21379. Pre-2001 legacy format. The cover sheet listed the property as a new condominium development, building permit issued 2021, first occupancy projected 2026. A structure permitted for the first time in 2021 didn't carry a pre-2001 pin. That number meant the parcel had been registered under a different description before the electronic transition, which meant whatever stood on that land was old. Old enough to be subject to heritage designation reviews under the Ontario Heritage Act. Heritage designation meant you couldn't demolish without a 6-month council review, at minimum. Darcy stood with the page in her hand. The sensible thing was to set it down and leave. These were not her people. This was not her deal. She had a bus to catch, the last 504 King Street car that would get her home before 1 a.m. But she thought about her father. She thought about the brownfield contamination report that had destroyed him 12 years ago. The one he didn't write, The one that bore his forged signature. The one he spent 4 years fighting through appeals before the stress took his heart at 56. She thought about the name she'd found buried in the old municipal records during the sleepless nights of her second year at U of T, before the money ran out and she had to leave. Edmund Fairfax. "The zoning certificate," Darcy said. The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet before something irreversible happens. 25 heads turned toward the girl in the visitor lanyard. Warren Blaze spoke first. "I'm sorry, who exactly are?" Let her finish. Henrik hadn't moved, but he was looking at her now, really looking, with the kind of attention that felt like pressure applied from all directions at once. "You have 30 seconds. Darcy's voice was steadier than she expected it to be. The zoning certificate in the package, tab 7. It's dated February 19th of this year. "That's current," Emery said flatly. "February 19th was Family Day," Darcy said. "It's a statutory holiday in Ontario. Service Ontario is closed. Municipal planning departments don't issue zoning approvals on Family Day. That certificate is either backdated or it's a forgery." The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then came the quiet, high-stakes kind of chaos. Laptops snapping open. Emery pulling out his phone. Someone from the back of the room reading the Ontario public holiday calendar aloud from a government website, his voice going smaller and smaller as he confirmed it. "She's right," he said. "February 19th. Family Day, provincial offices closed." Henrik looked at Warren. Warren's expression, for just a moment, flickered in a way that Darcy noted and filed. "There's more," she said, because she was already this far in. She placed the title page on the table. "The pin on the primary parcel is a pre-2001 legacy format, 5-digit prefix. That means the land was registered under a different designation before the registry was modernized. Whatever is on that property may predate the 2021 permit by decades. If there's an existing structure, it could carry a heritage flag under the Ontario Heritage Act. That means no demolition without a formal council review. 6 months, minimum. You wouldn't be buying a new development site." She paused. "You'd be buying a heritage liability dressed up as a blank canvas." Henrik picked up the title page. He read it without speaking. Then he looked at Emery. "Verify the pin." "I'm all ready," Emery was typing. Then he stopped. He read whatever was on the screen twice. The color left his face entirely. "There is an existing structure registered to that pin. An industrial warehouse built 1974. Provincial heritage flag applied 2019. The understanding moved through the room in waves, like cold air through water. Fairfax wasn't selling a development. He was selling a trap. The moment Carrick Capital signed and took ownership, they would inherit a heritage-designated building they couldn't touch, on land they'd paid new build prices for, with a fraudulent zoning certificate that would collapse under regulatory scrutiny and take the firm down with it. Henrik stood up. He didn't look at the 25 lawyers. He looked at Darcy. "What is your name?" "Darcy Quinn." "You work in filing." "Temporarily." Something moved in his expression. Not warmth yet, but recalibration. The precise adjustment of a man who had just discovered his instruments were off. "Step into the hallway with me." In the corridor, 42 floors above the city, Henrik stood with his hands in his pockets and asked her how she knew about pre-2001 pins and heritage flags. She told him about her father. She told him about the urban planning degree she'd left 3 credits short of finishing when her mother was diagnosed, and about the years since. A series of contract jobs that never quite fit, carrying knowledge that no one had ever asked her to use. She did not tell him about Fairfax and her father. Not yet. That felt like a card she needed to hold. Henrik was quiet for a moment. My entire team missed it. "They were looking at the financial model," Darcy said. "They weren't looking at the land history." "I need you to stay," he said. "I need you to go through everything else in that package." She stayed. It took 4 hours and a pot of terrible office coffee. What she found made her chest tight. The Fairfax Tower proposal wasn't one forged certificate. It was layered, patient, constructed fraud. 3 of the subsidiary parcels carried environmental assessment certificates with signature dates on other statutory holidays. The required archaeological survey, mandatory under the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada for any development near former industrial land, was missing entirely. And buried in the construction timeline was a subcontractor agreement with a numbered company whose CRA business registry number, when she looked it up, resolved to a firm that had been struck from the registry in 2020. Dead company. Active contract. Someone had been routing payments into an account that no longer officially existed. She printed everything and put it in a clean folder. When she brought it to Henrik at 4 in the morning, he read without speaking. When he finished, he closed the folder and asked one question. Who in my organization had access to the full due diligence package before tonight? Darcy thought about Warren's face when the pin was first mentioned. The way his expression had gone flat and controlled, like a man managing his reaction rather than simply having one. She told Henrik what she'd observed. He didn't look surprised. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. What followed wasn't elegant. Henrik's security team brought Warren in at 6 in the morning, not from his office but from a parking garage 2 blocks away, where he was sitting in his car with his phone in his hand. They found a draft message to an encrypted number. 3 words, "Package is clean." He hadn't sent it yet. Faced with Henrik across the boardroom table and the full weight of what Darcy had documented, Warren didn't hold out long. He told them about the numbered account. He told them about the $800,000 deposited in 3 tranches into an account held in his wife's maiden name. He told them about Edmund Fairfax's lawyers approaching him 18 months ago with an arrangement so clean on the surface that he'd almost convinced himself it wasn't what it was. "The holiday dates on the certificates," Darcy said, leaning forward. "Fairfax couldn't have known which ones your team would check first without someone telling him the review order. You told him what to forge and what he could leave incomplete." Warren looked at his hands. "He said Carrick would sign regardless. He said your team always signed eventually." Henrik said nothing. He looked at Darcy instead, and in that look was something she hadn't expected. Not simple admiration, but recognition. The kind given by a person who had spent years surrounded by people who only ever saw what they'd been shown. Edmund Fairfax was arrested on a Tuesday morning in late March, outside the glass doors of his King Street office. The charges included fraud over $5,000, forgery of public documents, and breach of the Ontario Heritage Act. Warren Blaze cooperated with the Crown. The $800,000 was recovered within a week. The city planner whose signature Fairfax had forged on a contaminated brownfield report 12 years earlier, the fraud that had dismantled a good man's career and quietly shortened his life, was named in the press release as a related matter under review. It was a small paragraph near the bottom of the page. Darcy read it 4 times on the GO train home. She held herself together until she got through her apartment door. Then she sat on the kitchen floor and let herself cry for about 10 minutes. For her father, for the years rerouted by someone else's dishonesty, for the weight of having known something for so long with no one powerful enough to listen. Then she got up, washed her face, and made tea. 2 weeks later, Darcy was sitting across from Henrik in his actual office, not a borrowed boardroom in the early hours of the morning, in a chair that was genuinely comfortable, which still felt faintly surreal. He had created a position for her, head of land title integrity. The salary figure he named made her go very still. "I need someone who reads the story behind the numbers," he said, "not just the numbers." She told him her conditions. A full contract, not another temp arrangement. Direct access for her team to municipal archives, including Heritage Branch records. Company funding for the 3 remaining credits of her urban planning degree, because she was finishing it regardless. And one more thing. A formal letter on company letterhead, signed by Henrik, submitted to the City of Toronto's Records Division, acknowledging that the 2013 Brownfield report had been falsified and that the planner whose name appeared on the original documents had been misrepresented. Henrik read through the list without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "The last item, the planner." "My father," Darcy said. "His name was Gordon Quinn. He died in 2018. I want the record corrected while the correction still means something to someone who knew him." Henrik was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, the city carried on in its usual indifferent way, construction cranes and streetcars and Lake Ontario going silver in the afternoon light. "Done," he said. "All of it." He offered his hand. She shook it. His grip was warm and steady and lasted exactly 1 beat longer than a purely professional handshake needed to. Darcy noticed she filed it away. She was good at filing things. 6 months later, on a Friday evening in September, Henrik asked her to meet him at an address she didn't recognize on Front Street. She arrived to find a restored Victorian commercial building, brick, tall windows, a small brass plaque beside the door that read Carrick Heritage Trust, newly Renstarred. Inside, the main hall was empty except for 2 chairs, a folding table, and a bottle of Niagara Peninsula Riesling that Henrik opened with a corkscrew that looked like it belonged in someone's grandmother's kitchen drawer. "What is this?" Darcy asked. "The Trust will fund heritage conservation reviews for at-risk industrial properties across Ontario," he said. I'm naming the inaugural grant after your father, the Gordon Quinn Memorial Award for Municipal Planning Excellence. He handed her a glass. The first recipient is a third-year planning student at U of T. She caught a pin irregularity in a proposed infill development in Leslieville. Found it before it went to City Council. Darcy took the glass. Her throat felt unreliable. You didn't tell me you were doing this, she said. I was reasonably sure you'd argue me down to something smaller. He looked at her the way he had in the hallway at 4 a.m, assessing and certain at the same time. You have a habit of undervaluing what you've actually earned. She thought about the visitor lanyard, the midnight courier runs, the last streetcar home. She thought about 25 suits looking through her like she was furniture, and about a girl who had absorbed a lifetime of dinner and table conversations about pin formats and heritage designation reviews at a kitchen table in Scarborough, never knowing that inheritance would one day be the most important thing in a room full of people who had actual degrees. My father would have found this entirely excessive, she said. I know, Henrik said, and smiled genuinely the way she'd seen him do only twice before. It transformed his face. He raised you, didn't he? They stood in the empty hall of the new trust and drank their wine while the September light turned amber through the tall front windows, and Toronto went on below them, doing what it had always done. Utterly unaware that a woman nobody had looked at had quietly rewritten a small and important piece of its history. Edmund Fairfax was convicted the following spring, 4 years. Darcy finished her degree that June. Henrik sat in the audience at Convocation Hall with wildflowers. Not roses, wildflowers, the kind her mother had always preferred, and when Darcy came down from the stage with the parchment she'd spent a decade earning, she found him in the crowd without difficulty, because he was the one who looked as though he'd had something to do with it. You didn't, she told him. No, he agreed, and handed her the flowers, but I was here. That was enough to go on with.